Maleficent, Mistress of Evil is the not-so-long-awaited sequel to 2014's Maleficent, which was a retelling of the original Sleeping Beauty animated film, and was said to be focused on the story/origins of one of the most iconic animated villains of all time in that film. But in this film, with some slight spoilers to the first film, the film once again stars Angelina Jolie as the titular Maleficent, and it's been a few years since the Princess Aurora was rescued by Maleficent and made Queen of the Moors. If you have not seen the first movie, that is confusing. It's basically I will say one thing about the first movie. It's basically if you gave Sleeping Beauty the Wicked treatment, where instead of showing an actual villain, you show that she's a misunderstood hero, which is weird. But anyway, at the start of this film, the second film, Philip returns and proposes to Aurora, which in turn triggers a chain of events that leads to a political and personal betrayal, an unexpected discovery, and even a war that's set to tear two neighboring kingdoms apart. I didn't know how to word this exactly, but I went somewhere and I found, like, a basic synopsis, so I just kind of quoted that with the whole, like, an unexpected discovery part. I first saw the first Maleficent when I was back in my tech school right after I went through basic. For those of you confused by the term tech school, I've mentioned it before in one, maybe two previous videos, but anyway. I would go to a nearby Redbox, I'd grab like 3 or so movies, and then I'd take them back to my dorm and watch all 3 or however many I got in just the one day. I got this movie that one day, I got the Lego movie, and then I got 50 Shades of Grey, which I think I watched this one first, I don't really remember. But I mostly want to keep my opinions on Sleeping Beauty, the original animated movie, and, sorry, I'm blanking. Oh, and the original, or the first Maleficent movie. I want to keep those for their respective reviews down the line, which that'll be fairly easy since I'm still in Korea, or at least hopefully it will. And since I'm a proud Disney Plus subscriber, hopefully I'll be able to get to that eventually while I'm here. But knowing my procrastinating nature and how busy I do get sometimes, we'll see. Anyway, before I get into my thoughts on this film, I first want to remind you guys to hit that like button and also to hit that subscribe button if you haven't already, especially if you haven't already. And short disclaimer for those of you who are new, I normally use a pro and con setup, so, you know, just in case you're a little confused by what I'm doing, that's just how I do it. Sometimes I keep the sections separate, sometimes I don't. You know, we'll see how everything works out with this overall product once this is over. Anyway, let's get into my review of Maleficent 2, Mistress of Evil. So one of the things that people took away from the first film was the performance given from Angelina Jolie as Maleficent. Say what you will about that first film, it almost seems like a fact that Jolie gave a great performance, and I thought that she did then, and she gave another wonderful performance in the sequel. That is, when she's actually on the fucking screen. This film has so little of the character of Maleficent that it feels more like Sleeping Beauty 2, if anything else. And I say that because, I don't know, it never really feels like there's a definitive protagonist in this for a lot of the time. It just goes back and forth, it's really weird. But anyway, just to throw it out there, I mentioned this issue in my review of the movie Glass, which came out last year, and if you have a character that is either barely in the film compared to others, or their presence has little to do with the plot itself, or even both, don't name the goddamn movie after them. There's no point. I mean, Elle Fanning comes across more as a main character in the film, but again, very slightly, very slightly. If anything, Maleficent is treated as more of a supporting character whose separate journey is important to showcase things in order for the audience to understand more aspects of the plot, and if that isn't enough to make you wonder why she's considered the main character, she spends most of her time not talking or really contributing to the overall plot, except for maybe 2 out of 3 of the acts, and I'll touch on the act structure later. One of the first things to notice about this film that is actually pretty good are the visuals. In the same year that the quote-unquote live-action Lion King came out, it wasn't a surprise that this film was going to look amazing with the visuals, particularly with the Moors and its inhabitants. It really adds to the enjoyment of those scenes of which they're a part in. I will admit, I wasn't expecting them to be that good, but I will admit the visuals were pretty good. There is a third act battle that, while not made interesting by what preceded it, I have to say that this was an entertaining battle sequence. Surprisingly, there's a lot of death, or at least more than I thought that they would showcase on screen. And they do some clever things during this battle, especially involving these weapons of mass destruction, or at least whatever a medieval fairy tale world's own versions of a WMD would be. Regardless of any negatives that I have talked about, or will talk about in this review, just does not matter for this. Michelle Pfeiffer is the worst part of this film, in my opinion, and it's not even her performance. Her performance couldn't have saved anything in this part. The main reason why I walked away with a bad taste in my mouth when the film came out, as well as the reason why I still had the same bad aftertaste when rewatching Maleficent 2 for this review. Her character is a purely one-dimensional expositional character. One of those ones where, if this was a realistic script, there would be so much more talking between characters than there actually was about things and feelings that are going on. But then, if that happened, the story wouldn't happen, so we must press on in any way that we can, you know, by not actually explaining things, except explaining things at the same time, but in a way where they don't trust the audience to understand what the fuck is going on. She goes into this campy sort of villainy that both suits the film and at the same time doesn't. Best way I can describe the pacing in this film. Actually, here's how the film feels, but it's not subject to how long the movie actually is. It's 2 hours. It is 2 hours and 1 minute. Just a hair over 2 hours. Like, not even a hair, just like, okay, yeah, a hair. But anyway, the first act feels like 10 minutes of pretty visuals and a cliched, terribly written story. The second act in itself feels like an entire movie. It feels like it lasts 2 hours and is extremely dull. And the third act, despite being interesting with the battle that I actually enjoyed, feels like 5 to 8 minutes of this bonkers bloodshed that feels especially inconsistent with what came before. But I will say this about the end battle sequences and its drastic change in tone from a boring film to a strange, more PG-13 Game of Thrones type of battle. It really does. It makes Maleficent 2 one of those films where when you know that the film is leading up to such a crazy ending, it kind of makes everything else more entertaining, but more in a it's so bad it's good kind of way. But if you still prefer logic in your stories, then abandon all preferences at the door. This film has a strange issue with using plot devices and subplots. They tacked on way too many... Oh. Sorry, sometimes I start talking and I forget to either breathe or realize, hey, I need to take a break. But no, because I'm an idiot. But anyway. They tack on way too many plot devices, subplots, whatever, in just a 2-hour film, and should have either added 20 minutes to the film to flesh out some of those points, or just simplified them altogether. If these plot points had to be in there. The biggest offender for me was the addition of the Dark Fae, Maleficent's own race. And this offender is the best way to describe how the plot devices are actually utilized in this film. The Dark Fae are introduced, given a backstory quickly through expositional dialogue and sequences, and then that's it. We aren't given time to really soak up any visual information or even given info, or even given the info that we were given, the audience was given by the screenwriter. Sorry, I had a brain fart as to how to actually say that correctly. But, it just happens, and then we move on. This instance is the best way to show how badly the plot points are tacked on and tackled throughout the film. Regardless of my thoughts on the first film, which, again, I'll mention whenever I get around to reviewing that, I don't know which one I like more, and that's not saying much on either film's account. But this film has way too many problems. A badly written villain, too many plot devices that are barely given time to actually be fleshed out, and a highly inconsistent pacing, though I will give it once again to Angelina Jolie giving us another great performance from the character, and the film actually at least looking beautiful. And the third act, that's something unto itself. So I cautiously recommend this film, but only because it is a sight to behold. Just not for the correct reasons. But with that, my review ends here. Thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed. Once again, don't forget to hit that like button and also hit that subscribe button, especially that last part if you haven't already. And as always, farewell until next video, all of you casual moviegoers and movie fans alike, and keep on being awesome.